Marcy, Skylight, Gray, Cliff, and Redfield done. Now the long walk back to the lodge.
3:55 a.m., just signed in. Santanoni Range, let's go.
The wind is whipping here in the Seward Range today.
Just finished the Macomb slide and my legs are on fire.
Well, I fell victim to the floating logs again.
Made it to the top of East Dix, peak number 3 of 5 for today here in the
Walking
Dix
along
Range.
Avalanche Pass.
On top of Rocky Peak Bridge, it's like a hurricane up here. Rain and wind here on Tabletop. Whiteface, number 6. Muddy day here on Street and Nye for number 7 and 8.
Sunny and blue on Haystack. Algonquin, up in the clouds, number 18.
Gothic's number 22.
Panther, number 38. Allen, number 45. 7:12 a.m. Big Slide, Adirondack, 46er.
You're listening to the 46 of 46 podcast.
December 27th, 2018. After a few days of recovering from the Christmas feasting and coming out of my food coma, I decided what better to do than grab the boots and hit the trail. It was around noon on that Thursday when I thought, I'd love to go for a hike today. And since the LP9'er mountains are all half-day or less hikes, they're the perfect option when you want to get into the woods spontaneously and enjoy a quick hike. So I woke up Wilson the Silver Lab from one of his many afternoon naps. I grabbed my backpack, got in the car, and drove over to the Adirondack Lodge to hike local favorite Mount Joe. Arguably the biggest bang for your buck in the Adirondacks in terms of difficulty to views ratio. The way Mount Joe sits right in front of the McIntyre Range, as Algonquin towers above, makes for an unbelievable view at the top, especially on a mountain that only takes a half hour or so, give or take, to get to the top. Down the lodge road we went, and Wilson and I soon arrived at the Adirondack Lodge, where I paid my $10 parking fee and found an available spot in the middle parking lot. So we parked the car and started gathering our gear, and I made a game-time decision to leave the snowshoes in the car. I had a feeling, based on the lack of snow we've had lately, along with the foot traffic that this trail gets, that we wouldn't need the snowshoes. And I was right. So I put the micro spikes on my boots, and we started walking to Mount Joe. Since it was a little after 1 p.m. today, the parking lot had a good amount of cars in it, but we would only run into a few people on the trail up Joe. So we walked back towards the info booth onto the trail over to Mount Joe, and maybe 300 feet or so in the woods until coming out to a little trail going along Heart Lake, passing the little museum. Shortly after passing the museum, we came to the Mount Joe trail on the right, and away we went. The plan for today on this quick sub 2.5 mile hike was to take the short but steep trail up and the long trail down, making for a nice loop. The short trail weighs in at 1.1 miles one way and is quite steep with high peaks caliber climbs, whereas the long trail, which is only slightly longer mileage-wise at 1.3 miles, is a significantly easier and more gradual ascent than the short trail, and more suitable for new hikers. A great little hike which would lead to huge Adirondack mountain views. We started on the trail and quickly came to the sign-in register where I signed us both in. Even on these small and easy trails, always sign in as it helps the DEC know how many people are using the trails, as well as being a potential lifesaver in an emergency situation, especially in the winter. So there is that tiny incentive as well. We signed in, and right from the start, the trail winds its way up through the woods, gently climbing. The trail is a mix of rock hopping and dirt trails, and thanks to the perfect amount of snow on the ground, the snow filled in a lot of the gaps between the rocks, making a semi-smooth sidewalk-like trail, which made the ascent quite fast, especially for Wilson. After a quarter mile or so, the junction for the short trail and the long trail hits, which is marked by a wooden sign. The long trail goes straight and the short trail is to the right, so up the short trail we went. This was my first time hiking a mountain with Wilson this year. We've hiked in the past, but usually I just take him on flat woods trails around my house in Lake Placid, since there's so many options. So I felt like he may be slower than he used to be, but he definitely wasn't. He was flying up the trail now, making me have to keep pace with him, so we were cruising, to say the least. The short trail has some long and steep climbs, similar to what you'll find on most high peaks. Steep, climbing up rock after rock for a good portion of the trail, constantly looking up to see if you're done yet, so it can be a real gasser. One of those trails that gently reminds you that you still have a heart and lungs. And quads. So as Wilson jumped from rock to rock as if the snow and ice-covered trail and boulders are meaningless to him, I'm huffing and puffing behind, going as fast as I can to keep pace with this 7-year-old, 110-pound silver lab. One unique element of Mount Joe that some find enjoyable and others don't is there are a number of wooden signs throughout the hike up the short trail going from 1 to 10. So as you're climbing, the numbers ascend 1 to 10. So you get a good feel as to how far you are from the summit, with 10 being near the top. So around halfway up, there's a big rock wall you'll walk along, and at this point I remember having to stop Wilson for a moment so I could get a few deep breaths in. At this point, since I was sweating a little bit, which is something you don't want to do in the winter, I took off my hat and gloves and put my gloves in my pack and my hat in my pants pocket. Big mistake. As we were climbing this short yet steep trail up Joe, passing a few groups on their way down here and there, and then after passing one group with a dog as well, I decided to put my hat back on since I was a little chilly, only to realize, wait, I lost my hat. My hat had at some point worked its way out of my right pants pocket and fallen onto the trail. Great. Once realizing this and turning around and not seeing it anywhere, I told the group I was talking to while I had this revelation, hey guys, I seem to have lost my hat. If you happen to see a green Carhartt hat on the way down, would you mind grabbing it and putting it at the trail registry for me? Of course, the nice man responded. So, off we went. Would I be reunited with my favorite hat? Only time would tell. I was thoroughly impressed with Wilson the Canine's performance today on this crunchy, somewhat snow-covered, somewhat icy little mountain. Most of the rocks were bare on the way up, so my decision to leave the snowshoes in the car proved to be okay, as micro spikes were all I needed, but they were definitely needed. Once landing above the major climbs, around 0.2 miles or so to the summit, the trail levels off as the long trail and short trails meet up before the final push towards the summit. This stretch has a number of wooden planks to walk on, which of course were completely covered by snow on this late December day. Wilson behaved very well, stayed close all day, and then we came around the corner to the wooden staircase up the final boulders to the summit. These stairs are actually new in the past few years, and they're a major help at this part of the hike. It's actually interesting looking back because I remember this section of Mount Joe being a bit challenging going up and down, and on a mountain typically used by new hikers and non-hikers alike, it's surprising that those stairs haven't been there forever. Wilson took off up the stairs first, albeit slowly and cautiously, as I could tell he was a bit nervous and awkward climbing them. Then we made it up to the slab, walked through the bushes, and we were there, greeted by the enormous Mount Joe views of Algonquin, Iroquois, Wright, Boundary, Marcy, Colden, and so many more on top of this magnificent rocky summit, standing 2,876 feet for Lake Placid Winter 9'er number 4 of 9. The sky was cloudy today, but fortunately the clouds were well above all of the mountains, which allowed the colors of the surrounding peaks to really burst. The views were as good as anything we could ask for. The only other person on the summit was a man who had been up there for a few hours at this point, taking time-lapse photos, and with the moving clouds I imagine that time-lapse was probably pretty incredible. But we made it to the top at 1:40 p.m., totaling about 25 minutes up. Amazing that just 90 minutes ago or so I was at home with no intentions of hiking today, and then the thought hit my head, and now here I am, standing on a mountain taking in the always amazing Mount Joe views. Good times. So Wilson and I stood there, looking around, enjoying the mountains in front of us, as the breeze and the wind was starting to blow. And then it hit me. Really wish I had my hat right now. Since it was early, my ears were frozen, and Wilson did so well on Joe, I decided to get moving and head back down and possibly add a quick trip up one of my favorite Adirondack mountains to the day, LP9'er Peak, Mount Van Hoevenberg. So we started down the trail, off the summit, down the wooden ladder, across the flat snowy trail in the woods to the trail junction for the long trail. Down the long trail we went, which was much icier than I anticipated. The long trail is a more gradual hike up and down with some cool rock walls along the route and definitely easier on the heart and the lungs. A lot of rock hopping. Many of the rock walls along the trail were covered in that 12-inch thick blanket of ice from top to bottom. We passed a number of groups heading up Joe on this trail. Fortunately, all of the groups we passed all had micro spikes on their boots, and they all had the appropriate gear to be hiking today, which you don't see often. The trail junction with the short trail suddenly appeared, much quicker than I expected, and we were on to the final push off the mountain. And then I saw the trail registry in the distance. Would my beloved green winter hat be there, or is it gone forever, destined to live a life of solitude lost in the Adirondack wilderness? So I approached the registry. Is it? I think. Maybe. There it was. A green hat hanging on the sign. Yes. My hat is back. So good to have you back, old friend. Big shout out to the hikers who found it and left it for me. Much appreciated. I owe you a 46 of 46 sticker. So I put the hat on my slightly frozen ears, and Wilson and I started making our way back to the parking lot to the car. Pure ADK is an online community and lifestyle brand that creates Adirondack-inspired apparel and goods. They're all about sharing their adventures and creating quality products that are a reflection of the outdoor lifestyle and activities we love in the Adirondack Mountains. Whether born and raised an Adirondack native or a frequent vacationer, we all have a common bond, those feelings and memories that the Adirondacks evoke in us. As a bonus for listeners of the podcast, they're providing a 15% off discount. When shopping in their online store, use the promo code 46podcast to redeem the offer. PureAdirondacks.com. Check it out. 46podcast.
Pure ADK. Exploration Unbound.
A few minutes later, we were at the car, and I texted my wife letting her know we were going to hike Mount Van Hoevenberg now, since it was only around 2 o'clock. Still a few hours left of daylight. So we hopped in the car and drove down the Lodge Road the short distance to the South Meadows parking lot, parking right in front of a car with a ton of Adirondack Hiking Challenge stickers, including a couple 46er stickers and even a Lake Placid 9'er sticker. So I had a feeling this person was probably hiking Mount Van Hoevenberg as well today. The South Meadows lot had about half a dozen cars parked there at the time, so Wilson and I got out of the car and started walking down the South Meadows snow-covered road towards the Mount Van Hoevenberg trailhead. I left the snowshoes in the car again, as I didn't think I was going to need them over here today either. While walking down the trail towards the lot, we did everything we could to avoid the few cross-country ski trails that people had made, and soon we came to the beginning of the trail on the left, marked by a wooden sign with the registry and eyesight just slightly up the trail. We signed in and began the approach towards Van Hoevenberg. The trail starts with a flat and very straight mile walk through the forest towards the mountain. And when I say straight, I mean the trail is like an arrow straight. The surrounding trees on this stretch of land makes it feel very remote, even though it really isn't, but it's a great stretch of forest with enormous trees on both sides of you. Wilson was about 10 feet in front of me during this whole portion of the trail, and the snow was crunchy and minimal. No need for the snowshoes here. There's a few decent-sized trees across the trail and other blowdown which we ducked under and hopped over as we made our way to the Beaver Pond a mile into the trip. This pond was about 3/4 of the way frozen over today, and it makes for a great view as it sits at the base of Mount Van Hoevenberg in front of you, and you can see the summit ledges from down here. Shows you exactly where you're about to head. Once at the pond, we followed the trail to the left as it skirts its way around. This portion of the trail I found in the past can be slightly confusing and could probably use a few more trail markers to aid in where to go to get around the pond, as you'll end up doing some rock hopping in the stream, trying to not step in the water and dunk your boot. Today the water was mostly, but not fully frozen, so it made it slightly easier than the summertime to make our way around. Once we finished around the pond, I decided to have a granola bar, and upon opening my pack, I was reminded about a delicious bag of peanut butter M&Ms I had brought along. That's right. Peanut butter M&Ms. I didn't eat them on the last hike. The red bag, of course. So I put them in my right pants pocket to snack on throughout the hike. You'd think I would have learned what happens when you put something in your pants pocket. This is the type of trail that once you get to the mountain, you start going up pretty rapidly, but there's other dips and whatnot in the trail, so it's not too terrible on the lungs. The trail was quite evident due to other hikers having been here recently, and the ascent is decently marked with trail markers, and fortunately the trail markers from hikers before me were seemingly going the right way. You really can never fully trust the trail from hikers ahead of you in the winter, since they could just be going the wrong way, so it's important to be mindful and not blindly follow the tracks. Wilson was doing well, climbing up. His energy seemed to still be high as I looked around at the open forest, filled with the naked trees with no leaves, allowing for open views that can only be seen in the winter months. Views of Pitch-Off and Cascade in particular through the trees. We continued up a few steeper, rugged sections. Still no need for snowshoes today, thankfully, since mine were left in the van. And after climbing one of these sections, I reached into my pocket to grab some of those delicious morsels known as peanut butter M&Ms. Empty. Must have put them in my left pocket. So I took off my other glove and confidently reached into my left side pocket, sure that that's where I put them. Empty as well? So I reached back into my right pocket. I must have just not felt it. It's gone. At some point up the mountain, just like my winter hat just a couple hours ago on Mount Joe, The full unopened bag of the delectable peanut butter M&Ms had